Sometimes history pivots on a single moment. And on June 28, 1914, that moment was a gunshot. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand wasn't just a political hit. It was like striking a match in a room filled with gasoline. So how on earth did this one event drag the entire globe into one of the most devastating wars in human history?
Well, that's what we're going to unpack today. We're going to dive into how World War I started, what it was really like to fight in it, and this is the fascinating part, how all that destruction somehow, paradoxically, became this incredible engine for change that literally built the world we live in now.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The assassination itself didn't instantly start the war. No, what happened next was this month-long, nail-biting diplomatic crisis. It was a terrifying chain reaction, a whole series of dominoes just waiting to fall, all because of this tangled mess of alliances, secret ambitions, and some really, really bad judgment calls.
Just look how fast this all spiraled out of control. So Austria-Hungary gets Germany's backing, and they see their chance to finally put down Serbian nationalism for good. But then Russia, who sees itself as Serbia's big brother, starts mobilizing its huge army. That, right there, triggers Germany's master plan, which meant they had to declare war on Russia and its ally France, immediately. And then, when Germany plows through neutral Belgium to get to France, well, that forced Britain to jump in. And just like that, in a little over a month, a local squabble became a full-blown European catastrophe.
So let's head to the Western Front, because this is where everyone's ideas about war just completely shattered. They all thought it would be a quick, glorious fight, that the boys would be home by Christmas. What they got instead was something brand new and absolutely horrifying.
This slide really shows you the tragic disconnect, right? The generals were still thinking about brave cavalry charges, but their soldiers were armed with the brutal technology of the 20th century. The machine gun and modern artillery were so ridiculously powerful on defense that the only option was to dig in. And that created this massive, ugly scar of trenches stretching all the way from Switzerland to the sea.
And this is what happens when old tactics meet new weapons. Just let that number sink in for a second. Over 57,000 casualties in a single day. That's like the entire population of a small city wiped out. It wasn't war as anyone knew it. It was industrial-scale slaughter. Men were just sent over the top, again and again, straight into machine gun fire, all for a few yards of muddy ground.
And this desperate need to break that bloody stalemate led to even more terrifying weapons. When Germany unleashed chlorine gas at Ypres, it brought a whole new kind of horror to the battlefield. Suddenly, the very air you breathe could kill you. The chemical arms race was on, and warfare just got a whole lot darker.
But here's the great paradox of this war. In the middle of all that death and destruction, the sheer size of the crisis forced society to adapt and innovate in ways no one could have ever imagined. The devastation actually became a bizarre catalyst for revolutionary change.
It seems like a crazy question, right? But the answer, believe it or not, is a complicated yes. The war created problems on a scale nobody had ever dealt with before. And to solve them, people had to come up with some truly radical new ideas in medicine, in technology, and even in how society itself was structured.
Just look at this incredible explosion in medical science. These weren't things developed in quiet labs over decades. They were born out of absolute necessity. Shrapnel caused facial injuries so gruesome that it literally created the field of plastic surgery from scratch. The sheer number of wounded soldiers meant we had to figure out how to store blood, leading to the world's first blood banks. And Marie Curie, yes, that Marie Curie, developed mobile X-ray vans to find bullets and shrapnel right on the front lines, saving countless lives.
And this revolution went way beyond medicine. With millions of men gone, women stepped up to fill their jobs. They built the weapons, they drove the buses, they kept their countries from falling apart. These canaries, named for how the TNT they worked with turned their skin yellow, proved once and for all they were just as capable and patriotic as men. And you better believe that their contribution was a massive, undeniable reason they finally won the right to vote.
But there was a terrifying flip side to moving millions of people around the globe. All those packed troop ships and training camps became the perfect breeding ground for disease. The infamous 1918 Spanish flu almost certainly didn't start in Spain. All signs point to a farm in Kansas. From there, American soldiers took it to the front lines, and it exploded into a global plague that killed more people than the entire war.
Okay, so let's jump to the end of the war. How was this brutal 4-year stalemate finally broken? And what did the world even look like when the guns finally went silent?
So, 1917 was the game-changing year. On one hand, Russia collapsed into revolution and dropped out of the war, but on the other hand, the United States jumped in. Germany's policy of sinking any and all ships headed to Britain, including American ones, was the last straw. The arrival of millions of fresh American troops and America's industrial might was the knockout blow for the exhausted Allies. The scales had tipped for good.
Germany tried one last desperate push in the spring of 1918. When that failed, the end came incredibly fast. The Allies, now reinforced with all those American soldiers, launched a relentless counterattack called the 100 Days Offensive. The German army just crumbled. And then, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the fighting just stopped.
But that silence came at a price that is just impossible to comprehend. Nearly 10 million soldiers dead, another 7 million civilians gone from hunger, disease, and violence. An entire generation of young men was lost, and the map of the world was redrawn forever.
So that leaves us with this huge, complicated question. The Great War was a furnace that forged new technologies, new medicines, and new societies. It toppled ancient empires. But the peace treaty that ended it all was so harsh on Germany that it created this deep, bitter resentment that would simmer for 20 years before exploding into an even deadlier war. So it was called the War to End All Wars, but maybe, just maybe, its real legacy was the peace that ended all peace. What do you think?